So the company that was in charge of production of the Acolyte here in the UK have released their accounts just a couple of days ago, and what's in there is absolutely insane, and I want to jump in and have a look at the numbers because it shows that the cost of this show was far higher than we originally thought. But what I do want to say firstly is that this is in no way an agenda against the show itself. Although I wasn't a huge fan of it, I don't hold any hate towards the show, the actors, the people in charge, and I know there's a lot of toxicity around the show. There's going to be a lot of comments talking about how, the woke agenda, etc., caused the downfall of the show. In actual fact, it was bad management, it was bad, kind of bookkeeping that I think ultimately caused the downfall of this show. And again, I just kind of want to preface this by saying that this is not intended to be an attack. It's just, again, to look at the facts, because this can't be allowed to happen again. This can't be allowed to take place in every single show that Star Wars produces, because otherwise it will kill off the brand. If Disney is not more responsible, if Lucasfilm is not more responsible with their financial side of things, then it is ultimately going to lead to the overall failure of the brand, or at least the brand being put onto ice for a good number of years. And being a Star Wars fan, I don't want that. I want Star Wars to continue. I want Disney and Lucasfilm to continue making Star Wars content reasonably, well costed, and with decent quality. And so far, we've not always got that. So I want to just delve into the accounts here and have a look at what exactly has gone on during the production of The Acolyte. Okay, so this is the accounting for Blue Stockings UK Limited, which again is a UK-based company. As with many countries, here in the UK, if you're a limited company, you are required to submit your accounts at least once every financial year, and that is then made available for the public to view. So this is what it is here, essentially. This is the company that was set up. Originally, they were rumoured to be doing the production for Rangers of the High Republic. As it turns out, no, it was in fact the Acolyte that this company was set up for. And like with the movies, there are always kind of subsidiary companies set up for the productions, just to kind of keep things under wraps. I think in the old sort of documentaries, George Lucas said that the reason they changed the production company names was because people were charging them out the arse when they realised, oh, actually, this is Lucasfilm, this is the next Star Wars film, we're going to charge them double what we normally would. So what they did, and it's quite clever, they would set up these subsidiary companies that, said they were going to film, this Blue Milk film that, actually was Star Wars, but because, the people who, were charging them for the space, the cameras, the crew, they didn't really know much better. They just charged them the normal amount, whereas if it'd been, Lucasfilm and they said, this is the next Star Wars film, they'd know that there was lots of money behind it, and, they would ultimately be charging them far, far more. So it's a common practice for a lot of big companies to create subsidiaries with random names, with people in charge who are affiliated with, the main company, but it keeps the risk, kind of separated. So this is Blue Stockings Limited. This is their accounts for the year ending September 2023. You can see 4 directors here, registered in Hammersmith, London, and it's all been audited and all the numbers are in here. Now, we know for a fact that this company is definitely linked to Disney and Lucasfilm, because at least 3 of the directors have ties to UK-based Disney companies. And again, they are all named as directors on the boards of those companies. Not to say they're directors of, Disney itself, just, again, some of the subsidiary companies in the UK. And again, that information is freely available on the Companies House website that all limited companies in the UK have to submit their findings to. It is a fantastic website to see business ongoings, to see what people are involved with. I've used it plenty of times in the past, to look up dodgy companies and dodgy people, the kind of people who set up conventions that then either fail to deliver or are completely cancelled and then refuse to give people their money back. You can trace, obviously the people behind that through things like Companies House, and I'm sure that there is a similar mechanical website in the US and other countries. So again, getting down to it here, the nitty gritty, this is a standard kind of report for any limited company in the UK. You have the kind of strategic report, which talks about the ongoings of what the company was doing that year, and immediately you can see that the company says it was, involved in a high-end television production up here in the review of the business. Now, the concerning thing is here, and again, taken in context, it's not as bad as it looks on the paper, but it says the company made a loss before tax of £28.8 million in 2023 and almost £6 million in 2022. So combined, that's again almost £35 million of loss between the 2 years that the Acolyte was in production. And again, Acolyte went into production in very, very early 2022, so we know that the timelines match up for, the production costs and the times of production for the Acolyte, because it doesn't outright state in these reports that this is the Acolyte that it is responsible for, but everything ties up in regards to, obviously the dates, the costs, and, the fact that it was in the UK, the Acolyte was filmed in the UK, nothing else was. So we're up 99.9% certain that this company was in charge for the production of the Acolyte. Now, if I was, an investor in this company, which I don't think there is any investors other than Disney, you would be extremely concerned at the next statement, because it says during the period and at the period end had net assets of £37,290 and the year before £8,867. So you consider a company that only has net assets of about £38,000 has just made a £29 million loss. You can probably see that company is in massive debt, if that's the only thing that you look at. However, you look at the next paragraph and you can see here it says the directors have reviewed the risks and resultant uncertainties facing the business as being the ability to secure future contracts. So basically they're saying that we recognise that this was a failure and that it might impact on our ability to get future work and be profitable. But then it says, however, the ultimate parent company, Disney, has provided sufficient assurance that it will support the company and provide necessary finances for its future operations. So again, it's basically saying Disney is going to take the loss. Whether this company actually continues on and makes more, productions, it'll be covered. Because again, that's what it is. Disney has taken the hit, they funded the production, and this company is essentially going to be in the clear. But again, it is still something that, they are responsible for filing the reports for. So again, the directors consider the company's key financial performance indicates to be whether the television program is completed in line with production budget. So again, basic kind of thing. We want to make sure that the budget that's been put out for this show is not extended, is not gone over. Now, this is again the big part, because it says here that the period end, the cost was forecasted to be over the production budget. So straight away, you can know for a fact that the cost of the show went over budget. I don't know how that's possible, because again, this is post-COVID, so that can't be used as an excuse. Sure, there were still some heightened costs because of, the post-COVID era, but that should have been taken into account by the initial budget, because again, they didn't start filming until very, very early 2022. So it says the overages compared to the production budget were approved and fully funded. Again, costs taken on by Disney, and the high-end television program continues to be funded by its financiers, Disney. So again, it's one of those where it's saying, yep, it came in over budget, but it's been covered by, our parent company, which is Disney. So yes, the rest of that is just talking about, the bits and bobs of what you need to put in just to assure that the company is running correctly. So what we want to skip to next here is to the actual financial reports, which is down here at the bottom. So in between that, they've got the auditing, which is essentially an independent investigation to make sure that everything has been filed correctly. And if this business was independent, whether they felt that it was going to be able to continue on trading and whether they were being honest towards their investors, which again, the investor at the moment, I believe, is solely Disney. So we come up here to the numbers for Blue Stockings UK Limited, and it covers both the financial year of 23 and 22. So what you've got here, and again, if you've not really looked at accounts before, it can seem a little bit overwhelming. But what we're saying here is this very top column, turnover, is how much money the company received during these two periods. So when the company was producing the show. So you can see here in the year end September 2023, they'd received £102,711,000 in income. The year before, it was £32.4 million. Now, again, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money to get in. And you would assume that that was probably what the original budget might have been. So somewhere around about £134 million, which again equates to, I guess, about $170, $180 million. So perhaps when Leslie Headland was talking about the production budget originally, whether she was talking about US dollars, that may have been truthful. That may have been the original budget for the show. However, the actual cost of the show is closer to £180 million, which again is about $230 million at the time if you consider the kind of exchange rates. Now, looking into this here, you can see the cost of sales is £134,333,277 in the year 2023. So immediately you can see that that's almost a £32 million loss if you take away turnover from cost of sales. So in 2023 alone, they lost £32 million. So the year before, it was £37.9 million losses. So again, they made a loss of almost £5 million, or £5.5 million in the previous year. So again, you look at that and it's £37 million that they've lost overall. And that's kind of crazy. It's kind of like, you know, that's where the show has been more expensive. That's where they talked about the show being over budget by, you know, £37 million, which is closer to about $42 million, which is a crazy amount. A crazy amount. The rest of it just goes into details about, you know, administrative expenses, which are minimal, and other operating income, which might be things like, you know, subsidies, grants, things like that come in from the government for filming in the UK. And then you can see at the very end, loss before taxation, with these two things offset, is 28.8 million and 5.9 million in the year before. So overall, you're looking at 28.9 million loss on tax and 5.9 in the year before. And again, very, very small amount of profit at the end, which, you know, is negligible. So you can see that a lot of this here is massively concerning. If this was an independent company, they would be filing for bankruptcy. You know, they'd be filing for insolvency without doubt, because these numbers are just not manageable. Again, this is something that I have no idea how the cost of sales exceeded so much, and I'm sure that Disney is doing a thorough investigation to find out, but they did approve them. It said in the earlier statement that the costs of the overages had been approved. So clearly the accountants at Disney, I mean, let's face it, they're not going to say no and dump the whole thing, because they'd already put, you know, $160 million into it. So at that point, you at least want to try and recoup some of the money. But the whole point is that this is the reason why the whole thing failed. I know people are going to go on about the quality of the story, and I agree the quality of the story wasn't fantastic. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't as bad as some people said, and certainly diversity did not affect the show at all in terms of it being bad. It was bad because of an over-bloated production budget that went over the budget, and also the inconsistency in the writing. And so this is why Disney has clearly said, okay, we do not want a second season. Whether it's because we can't trust the people involved to keep the costs under control, or whether they just do not want to put that much money into a series. No series realistically should cost that much. $230 million is the cost of a good-sized movie, even in today. You know, even today's standards. And so you consider the fact that Andor cost $250 million, but that had 12 episodes. So this was by far and away the most expensive Star Wars show per episode. It doesn't even come close when you consider it. And again, the rest of the report here is kind of like breaking down, you know, how the money is kind of assigned at the moment in terms of how much debt they currently hold, how much cash they've got on hand. You know, you can see the previous year that they did have more cash than debt. However, they did have a lot of debtors coming in within the next year. So this is transferred to this year, and you can see now the debtors have gone up massively to 45 million, and they've only got 5 million in the bank. So again, whilst they are, you know, liquid in the way that they have cash on hand, they have far more, almost 10 times as much debt. And so, you know, they would be trading insolvent at this point if it was not for Disney covering the costs. And you can see that, again, falling due within 1 year is another $50 million. So again, all these things, the costs don't always come straight up. There's always, like, you've got to take into account the fact that a lot of it will be debt pushed into the future. So Disney is still going to be paying off this show for many years to come. And they obviously didn't get back the financial reward that they wanted. because again they wanted to make a profit off of any show, and most of that's going to be through subscriptions to Disney Plus, and it is going to make it very, very difficult because again, we don't get to really see the breakdown of the financial reports for Disney Plus. We just get to know how many subscribers there are, how much that relates to in profit. But Disney will not come out and say, well, these, subscribers came specifically because of the Acolyte, and I don't even think it's possible necessarily to do that, and that's why this era of TV streaming is so difficult to judge, because it's still all new. It's kind of very, very difficult compared to just being able to look at a box office result and compare that to the movie's budget. That's very kind of night and day, cut and clear. This is less so. You just look at the production budget. You look at, how many views did it get? And again, The Acolyte had a very strong opening. 11.1 million people in the first 5 days watched the first 2 episodes. Its problem was that it dropped off massively from that point. So again, whilst it had a strong start, it fell off. And that's just, unfortunately, the kind of cold, hard facts. We can all have our own opinion on whether the show, the quality of the writing was good, whether, you agree with the casting choices, which, again, I find to be a very shallow excuse for people to not like the show. By all means, don't like it because you don't, like the story itself. But if you have an issue with the race and the gender of the people involved, then, you are kind of being a bit of a dick. But you can see here now, this is kind of, again, showing us how the company ownership is broken down. So you can see that there is only one share in terms of, that's obviously going to be the parent company, which is Disney, but it's still a limited company because it has to be managed in that way. I'm sure a lot of that involves the taxing of the company as well. So a lot of this, again, just goes into breakdowns of, the indexes of, what's been going on. So you can see here, actually, we might get a little bit of a breakdown. Now, you can actually see here the list of employees, or the numbers of employees. So when the production was in, full effect, I guess, in sort of 2023, which I'm guessing is mostly where the main production and a lot of post-production was done, they had 344 people employed during that year. That's not to say they had 344 employed at the same time, and the overall cost of that employment was 20,115,000. Now, again, that's almost a tenth of the budget itself. I've got nothing to compare it to. It doesn't seem essentially high, compared to the fact that 344 employees is a lot. And if you were to do a straight divide of that number, it comes out to about £6,000 per employee. Now, obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, people who have only going to have worked for maybe a week, a month, so they're not going to have been paid for a full year's salary. Some people might have done, and obviously the actors would have been paid much, much more. But 20 million for the actual production crew is not necessarily the highest that you will see out there. From what I can understand. The rest of it here is just talking about how, again, the loss is all broken down in terms of tax, the carried forward losses, and this actually breaks down, obviously, the debtors themselves that were falling within a year. So you can see that a lot of it is corporation tax, which would be paid, by the end of the financial year in 2024. You can see that there's amounts owed by parent group, which is not a great deal. You've got VAT, and other debtors, which can be anything from suppliers to, the actual places that they, rented out with those agreements. And then you look at the creditors, and then most of it is just the group undertakings. They've got a little bit in accruals and deferred income, and then some small bits of other creditors. So there's nothing suspicious on here in terms of, how everything is broken down. There's nothing that indicates exactly where or how it went over budget. It literally just shows you that, A, it cost far more than we initially thought. It went over budget, which is not something that was reported initially. And obviously Disney are not going to tell us, hey, this went over budget by £37 million. And it just again shows you that this is firstly been absorbed by Disney, which is understandable. That's what's always going to happen. Disney is so financially secure that they can afford to absorb losses of that amount. But what they can't afford is to have something like this repeat itself over and over. And again, The only reason that we know this is because it is a UK-based production company. And again, I'd very much like to see if there was something similar that we could compare it to for other shows in the US or maybe in other countries. I don't know where Skeleton Crew is being filmed at the moment. That might actually be Pinewood Studios in the UK, actually. But The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, they were filmed in the US for the most part, so there's going to be different rules and regulations surrounding that, but it's very clear this show was totally mismanaged from a financial aspect. The production company, was clearly not properly prepared to handle the increasing expenses. And boy, would I love to be a fly on the wall at the financial meetings when they first looked at the, expanding costs, and they had to have that meeting to approve the budget going over, because, you want to see who's responsible, why it was so inflated, where did the money actually go, but you can see that there is quite a detailed report here. So again, I'm expecting a lot of, the typical toxic comments, in the video. It's one of those. You're not going to... Unfortunately, people have agendas. People are going to use this to incite, continued hatred. There's no doubt that this project was mismanaged. There's no doubt that this project failed. Not because of the reasons that people are going to try and cite, the usual suspects, but because it was financially mismanaged. And whether that's down to the inexperience of Leslie Headland, whether that's down to Disney just giving too much leeway to the people in charge, whether that's people taking advantage of, that leeway, or whether it's just pure ineptitude across the board. We'll never really know. All that we know is we've got some numbers, and here we are. So, yes. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See you for the next one.